The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system like a swarm of angry wasps. 12,000 ships of various sizes spread across space in perfect formation, their weapons already charging and their sensors sweeping for targets. Admiral Hyong stood on the bridge of the Unbreakable Dawn, watching the tactical display. What he saw made his jaw clench. The biomechanical fleet was huge, easily 3 million vessels of different sizes, all moving with an eerie coordination that suggested a single controlling intelligence. "My God," breathed Commander Sunho. "There are so many of them." "Numbers don't win wars," Hyong replied calmly. "Strategy does, and we have something they don't." "What's that, sir?" "Unpredictability." Captain Jiho's voice crackled through the communication system. "Admiral, this is indomitable. We've been observing the enemy for 18 hours. They move in perfect coordination, but they seem to follow predictable patterns. They don't adapt quickly to new tactics." "Good work, Captain. What's the status of the Villani?" "We've managed to evacuate about 50,000 from remote mining stations, but the main population centers..." Jiho's voice trailed off. "Understood. Join up with the main fleet. We're going to end this." The biomechanical swarm had noticed the human arrival. Across the vast enemy fleet, millions of organic sensors turned toward the newcomers. Through their collective consciousness, they shared information instantly. New species, unknown technology, estimated threat level, minimal. They were about to learn how wrong estimates could be. "All fighters launch," Hyong ordered. "Commander Taehyun, take your squadrons in fast and hard. Don't give them time to coordinate a response." 2,000. Human fighters screamed away from their carriers, moving in what looked like complete chaos to anyone watching. They didn't fly in neat formations like other galactic military forces. Instead, they swooped and dove and scattered like hunting birds, each pilot making independent decisions based on what they saw. Commander Taehyun led the first wave, his fighter dancing through space as biomechanical interceptors moved to meet them. The alien craft were fast and well-armed, but they moved in predictable patterns. Taehyun had been flying since he was 16, learning to navigate Earth's crowded airways where one mistake meant death. These aliens had never faced anything like human pilots. "Breaking left," he called into his radio as he spun his fighter, in a way that should have torn it apart. G-forces that would have killed most species barely made him grunt. Behind him, 2 biomechanical fighters collided as they tried to follow his impossible maneuver. All around him, his pilots were doing the same thing. They flew like madmen, taking risks that no sane species would attempt. But humans weren't sane by galactic standards. They were predators who had learned to hunt in 3 dimensions. "This is Red Squadron," reported Squadron Leader Soyeon. "We're seeing something weird here. The enemy ships seem confused by our tactics. They keep trying to form up into orderly groups, but we're not letting them." That was exactly what Hyung had hoped for. The biomechanical fleet was controlled by a group mind that relied on coordination and predictable responses. Human pilots didn't fight that way. Each one was an individual predator making split-second decisions based on instinct and training. "All capital ships, advance to firing range," Hyung ordered. "General Eunbi, prepare your Marines for boarding actions." The main battle began as human dreadnoughts opened fire on the biomechanical fleet. But even here, humans fought differently than other species. Instead of the long-range energy beam duels that characterized most galactic warfare, human ships closed to point-blank range and used kinetic weapons. Captain Jiwoo commanded the destroyer Retribution, and she flew her ship like a fighter pilot. Using the gravity well of a nearby gas giant, she slingshot her vessel around the planet and came up behind a cluster of bioships at impossible speed. "All guns, fire," she ordered. The Retribution's railguns spoke, hurling metal projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The biomechanical ships had shields designed to stop energy weapons, but they had never encountered anything like human kinetic bombardment. The projectiles punched through their defenses like they weren't there. "Target destroyed," reported Gunner Hyain. "Enemy formation is scattering." All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships used tactics that other species would have considered insane. Ramming attacks, point-blank broadsides, coordinated swarm assaults that should have resulted in massive friendly fire casualties but somehow didn't. But the real shock came when the first boarding parties launched. Sergeant Curie led her Marines in a direct assault on a biomechanical command ship. Their boarding pod punched through the alien hull like a bullet, and within seconds her squad was fighting hand-to-hand in the creature's organic corridors. The biomechanical entities were deadly in their own way. Part machine, part living tissue, with razor-sharp claws and built-in weapons. But they had never faced anything like human Marines in powered armor. "Contact left," Curie shouted, firing her assault rifle at a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a tank. The kinetic rounds tore through its biomechanical armor, sending green fluid spraying across the walls. Her Marines moved through the ship like a pack of wolves, covering each other and communicating with quick hand signals. They had trained for this kind of fighting in the deepest jungles of Earth, where predators could attack from any direction. "Ma'am," called Corporal Dong-hyun, "we're seeing something strange. When we kill one of these things, the others nearby seemed to get confused for a few seconds." Curie nodded. That matched what Dr. Wu Jin had theorized. The biomechanical entities were connected through some kind of group mind. When part of it was damaged, the whole system stuttered. "Focus on taking out the bigger ones," she ordered. "If their command nodes, removing them should disrupt their coordination." Meanwhile, back on the human fleet, Engineer Soman was making a discovery that would change the battle. She had been analyzing wreckage from destroyed bioships, and she had found something interesting. "Admiral," she reported over the communication system, "I think I know how these things work. They're not just biomechanical. They're using organic computing systems. Their entire network is based on biological processes." "What does that mean for us?" Young asked. "It means they're vulnerable to biological warfare, sir. Viruses, toxins, anything that disrupts organic functions. We might be able to create a weapon that attacks their network directly." It was a typically human solution. Fight biology with biology. Other species tried to solve problems with technology and logic. Humans had learned to fight dirty. "Do it," Young ordered. "Whatever you need." The battle raged for hours, but slowly the tide began to turn. The biomechanical fleet was larger, but it couldn't adapt to human tactics. Their group mind was designed for coordination, not the chaotic individual creativity that humans brought to warfare. As more bioships fell, their coordination began to break down. Units that had moved in perfect synchronization started making mistakes. Some ships fired on their own allies. Others flew in circles, apparently confused about their orders. "Sir," reported Commander Sunho, "the enemy fleet is showing signs of disorganization. I think we're actually winning." Admiral Hyung allowed himself a small smile. Humanity's first major battle with an alien enemy. And they were proving what he had always suspected, that sometimes the best defense was an overwhelming offense delivered by people who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Continue the assault. Let's show these creatures what happens when they prey on the innocent." Admiral Hyung stood in the command center of Terra Station, reading Captain Jiho's message for the third time. Around him, dozens of officers worked at their stations, coordinating ships and supplies across human space. None of them knew that. "Everything was about to change, sir?" his aide asked quietly. "Your orders." Hyung set down the tablet and walked to the main display screen. It showed a map of known space with human territory marked in blue. They controlled maybe 50 star systems, tiny compared to the old galactic powers. Most alien species still thought of humans as newcomers who got lucky with their technology. They were about to learn better. "Alert status to Code Black," Young ordered. "All fleets, all ships, all personnel. I want the 3rd Deathworlder fleet ready to jump in 6 hours." The command center went silent. Code Black meant total war. It meant humanity was going to fight, and fight hard. "Sir," the aide said carefully, "the Council protocols require us to notify other species before major military deployments." "The Council protocols can wait," Young replied. "There's a species dying out there, and we're the only ones who answered their call for help. That tells me everything I need to know about Council protocols." 2 hours later, the flagship Unbreakable. Dawn hummed with activity. Fleet Commander Sunho walked through the corridors checking on his crews. They moved with the quick efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their whole lives. In the marine sections, General Yunbi was briefing her officers. She stood in front of a holographic display showing the alien bioships, pointing out weak spots and entry points. "Intelligence suggests these things are part organic, part machine," she told her staff. "They're controlled by some kind of group mind. That means they'll be coordinated, but they might not handle individual initiative very well." Major Kiyuri raised her hand. "Ma'am, what's our rules of engagement?" "Simple," Yunbi replied. "If it's trying to eat peaceful civilians, we kill it. If it gets in our way while we're protecting civilians, we kill it. If it looks at us funny, we consider killing it." The Marines laughed. They were ready. In the science section, Dr. Wu Jin studied the limited data from Captain Jiho's ship. The biomechanical entities were unlike anything in human databases. They seemed to consume matter and convert it directly into more ships and creatures. "They're like a disease," he muttered to his assistant. "They spread and consume and reproduce. The question is, what's their weakness?" Every living thing had a weakness. Even humans, for all their advantages, could be stopped if you knew how. These biomechanical entities had consumed entire star systems. They had to have some kind of limitation. Dr. Wu Jin pulled up Earth's biological databases and started comparing. If these things were even partly organic, they might follow some of the same rules as Earth life. And if there was one thing humans understood, it was how to kill things. Meanwhile, on dozens of ships throughout the fleet, human soldiers prepared for battle. They cleaned their weapons, checked their armor, and said goodbye to people they loved. Most other species found human weapons disturbing. Kinetic projectiles, explosives, things designed to cause maximum physical damage. Humans had learned to fight on a world where everything wanted to kill them. Their weapons reflected that reality. Sergeant Minho strapped on his combat armor and looked around at his squad. They were young mostly. This would be their first real battle. But they had trained on Earth, where the wildlife could kill you if you made one mistake. They knew how to stay alive. "Remember what we learned in training," he told them. "These aliens might be smart, but they're not human. They haven't spent their whole lives learning how to be predators. We have." On the bridge of the Unbreakable, dawn, Admiral Hyung met with his senior staff. Commander Sunho reported that all ships were ready. General Yunbi confirmed that her Marines were loaded and prepared for ground assault. Dr. Wu Jin provided what little intelligence they had about the enemy. "What about the other galactic species?" Sunho asked. "Are they sending help?" Young smiled grimly. "The Althari Republic is still debating in their Senate. The Zendari Coalition wants more information before they commit forces. The Meridian Empire is concerned about the legal implications of intervening in a non-council world." "So we're alone?" "We're alone," Young confirmed. "Just like always." The truth was, most alien species were afraid of humans. They had heard stories about Earth, a planet where the weather could kill you, where the animals hunted in packs, where even the plants were poisonous. They thought humans were barely controlled savages who had somehow stumbled onto advanced technology. They weren't entirely wrong. Humans were predators, but they were predators who had learned to work together, to plan, to build. They were predators with starships and military training and a very clear idea of right and wrong. "Fleet status?" Young asked. 12,000. Ships ready for hyperspace jump, Sunho reported. Everything from fighters to dreadnoughts. Total personnel, 4 million military, 1 million support. It was the largest human military force ever assembled. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken months to organize, but these weren't normal circumstances. A peaceful species was being exterminated, and humanity was the only one willing to do something about it. "Sir," the communications officer called out. "Message from Captain Jiho. He's reached the Volani system. Enemy forces larger than expected. Estimate 3 million bioships and growing." Hyung nodded. "Tell Captain Jiho to stay alive and keep gathering intelligence. We'll be there soon." He turned to address his staff. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our first chance to show the galaxy what humanity really stands for. Not as the dangerous primitives they think we are, but as protectors, as the species that steps up when others step back. What if we can't win? Dr. Wu Jin asked quietly. Then we'll make sure they remember that humans tried, Young replied. But I don't think it will come to that. These biomechanical entities have been consuming peaceful species for who knows how long. They've never faced anything like us. He looked around the room at his officers. They came from every continent on Earth, every background and culture. But they shared one thing: they were human. They were the descendants of hunters and survivors, of people who had clawed their way to the top of the most dangerous food chain in known space. Jump coordinates locked in, the navigation officer reported. All ships report ready, Sun Ho added. Admiral Hyung took a deep breath. Somewhere ahead of them, an entire species was dying. But help was coming. Human help. Execute jump, he ordered. The stars shifted, and 12,000 human warships vanished into hyperspace, carrying death to those who would prey on the innocent. The alarm screamed through the mining station like a dying animal. Veltar pressed his 6 hands against the control panel, watching red warning lights flash across every screen. Outside the station's thick windows, the black ships moved like hungry insects against the stars. How many? He asked his assistant. Too many to count, came the reply. They just keep coming. Veltar's species, the Villani, had lived on this planet for 300 years. They were peaceful miners who dug beautiful crystals from the ground and sold them to other worlds. They had never hurt anyone. They had no weapons bigger than mining tools. They were going to die. The black ships were different from anything Veltar had ever seen. They looked alive, like they were made of metal and flesh mixed together. When they moved, they twisted and bent in ways that made his stomach hurt to watch. Worst of all, they were eating everything. The first ship had landed on mining site 7 2 days ago. Within hours, everything there was gone. Not destroyed, consumed. The buildings, the machines, even the ground itself had been swallowed up and turned into more black ships. Sir, we're getting reports from the capital city, his assistant said. The swarm has reached the main population centers. Veltar closed his eyes. 5 million Villani lived in the capital. Had lived. He knew without asking that they were all gone now. Open all communication channels, he ordered. Send out everything we have. Emergency frequencies, military bands, even the old trading routes. Someone has to hear us. His assistant worked quickly. Broadcasting now, sir. Full spectrum, maximum power. Veltar took the microphone with shaking hands. He had never made a distress call before. His people had never needed to. They were miners, not soldiers. They fixed problems with careful planning and hard work, not by calling for help. This is Administrator Veltar of the Villani mining colony on Kepler 442b, he said into the microphone. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. They are consuming everything in their path. We estimate 5 million civilians are already dead. Our defenses have failed. We need immediate military assistance. Please, anyone who can hear this, we are dying. Help us. He repeated the message in 12 different languages. Standard Galactic, Old Council, Trade Basic, and every other tongue spoken in this part of space. Then he sat back and waited. The first response came from the Galactic Council Emergency Network. A calm voice told him that his message had been received and that nearby member species were being contacted. Help would come as soon as possible. Veltar knew what that meant. No help was coming. The Council species were smart and civilized. They had rules about war. They held meetings and made plans and followed proper procedures. By the time they finished talking about helping the Villani, there would be no Villani left to help. More responses trickled in over the next hour. The Althari Republic expressed deep concern and promised to bring the matter to their Senate. The Zendari coalition requested detailed information about the attackers and suggested filing a formal complaint. The Meridian Empire offered to accept Villani refugees if they could reach their space. No one offered to fight. Veltar watched through the station windows as more black ships landed in the distance. They moved like drops of oil spreading across water, covering everything and turning it into more of themselves. Soon they would reach his station, Soon he would join his people in whatever came after death. That's when the new voice came through the speakers. Volani Station, this is Captain Jiho of the human vessel Indomitable. We received your distress call. What's your status? Veltar had heard of humans, but he had never met one. They were new to the galactic community. Their planet had only made contact 5 years ago. Most species thought they were dangerous primitives from some nightmare world at the edge of space. Captain Jiho, Veltar said into his microphone. Our world is being consumed by hostile biomechanical entities. Estimated force strength is over 1 million vessels. All our population centers have been overrun. This station will fall within hours. There was a pause. Then the human's voice came back, sounding different somehow. Harder. Copy that, Veltar. Maintain your position. We're coming to you. Captain, you don't understand. There are millions of them. Whatever ship you have, it won't be enough. Another pause. Then, Veltar, I'm looking at the enemy force through our sensors right now. You're right. One ship won't be enough. That's why I'm calling for backup. Backup? How many ships do your people have? Enough, Captain Jiho said. Trust me. Just stay alive until we get there. The communication cut off. Veltar stared at the radio in confusion. One ship of humans was coming to fight 1 million biomechanical vessels? It sounded like suicide. But something in the human captain's voice had been strange. He hadn't sounded afraid. He had sounded angry. Light years away aboard the human reconnaissance ship Indomitable, Captain Jiho turned to his crew. They had been exploring this sector when the alien distress call reached them. Standard procedure was to report it back to Earth Command and wait for orders. Jiho wasn't feeling very standard right now. Minji, he said to his chief engineer, how fast can we get to that system? If we push the engines? 18 hours. Do it. Daeho, I want every weapon we have ready to fire. Yuna, send a priority message to Admiral Hyung at Terra Command. Tell him we have a code black situation and need the 3rd Fleet deployed immediately. His communications officer, Yuna, looked up from her station. Sir, are you sure? A code black deployment means total war footing. The Admiral will ask questions. Then tell him this, Jiho said. Unknown hostiles are committing genocide against a peaceful species. They have biomechanical technology we've never seen before. And if we don't stop them here, they're going to keep spreading. He looked around at his crew. They were all young, all eager. None of them had ever seen real combat. That was about to change. Tell the Admiral one more thing, Jiho added. Tell him it's time for humanity to show the galaxy what we're really made of. The biomechanical swarm was learning fear. Deep within the collective consciousness that controlled millions of ships, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in countless millennia of conquest, the hive was encountering resistance. It couldn't understand or counter. Every species they had consumed before followed predictable patterns. They fought in organized formations, used energy weapons at long range, and followed logical tactical doctrines. The hive could predict their moves, counter their strategies, and eventually overwhelm them through sheer numbers. These new creatures, these humans, fought like nothing in the collective memory. They attacked in chaotic swarms that somehow coordinated perfectly. They used primitive kinetic weapons that punched through advanced shielding. They showed no fear of death, treating dangerous maneuvers as routine. Worst of all, each individual seemed to make independent decisions while still working as part of a greater whole. The hive had no framework for understanding such behavior. Admiral Hyung stood in his command center, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The biomechanical fleet was 3 times the size of his force, but it was losing. Human tactics were proving devastatingly effective against an enemy that relied on predictable responses. Admiral, came a voice from his communications officer. We're detecting massive hyperspace signatures. More enemy ships are jumping into the system. Hyung's smile widened. How many? Sensors show, my God, sir, at least 5 million additional vessels. They're calling in everything from across this sector. Perfect, Hyung replied calmly. His staff looked at him like he had gone insane. They were already outnumbered 3 to 1, and now the odds were getting even worse. Sir? Commander Sunho asked carefully. Should we consider withdrawing? Absolutely not, Young said. This is exactly what I wanted. Signal all units, begin Phase 2. Across the human fleet, his orders were received with grim understanding. Phase 2 had been planned from the beginning, but nobody had been sure they would get the chance to use it. Lieutenant Colonel Jaemin led the first specialist unit toward their target, a massive bioship that seemed to coordinate the movements of thousands of smaller vessels. His team had trained for this specific mission, capturing enemy command nodes intact. Remember, he told his Marines as their boarding pod approached the alien vessel, we need prisoners this time. Dr. Wujin wants to study their communication systems. The assault began like all human boarding actions, violently and without warning. But this time, Jaemin's team moved with surgical precision. They disabled rather than destroyed, captured rather than killed. Within an hour, they had secured 3 biomechanical command units and were transmitting them back to the fleet's science vessels. Dr. Wujin received the captured specimens with excitement. He had been working around the clock to understand the enemy's biology, and now he had living samples to study. Fascinating, he muttered as he examined the creatures. They were clearly artificial, but they used organic components in ways that Earth science had never imagined. Nari, are you seeing this? Tech specialist Nari looked up from her computer terminal. Yes, doctor. The neural patterns are incredible. Each individual unit is connected to all the others through some kind of quantum biological network. We disrupt it? Maybe. If we can isolate the quantum frequency they're using, we might be able to jam their communications. Or even better. What? We might be able to hack into the network itself. While the scientists worked, the battle continued to rage. But now it was clear that this was not just a fight for the Volani system. It was a trap. Admiral Hyung had deliberately engaged the biomechanical fleet in a way that would force them to call for reinforcements. He wanted as many of them here as possible, concentrated in one place where human forces could deal with them decisively. Captain Jiwoo executed another impossible maneuver, using her destroyer's artificial gravity generators to create a localized space distortion. Her ship seemed to teleport past a cluster of biovessels appearing behind them before they could react. This is retribution, she reported. Target cluster neutralized. These things still can't adapt to our movement patterns. Her crew had pushed their ship beyond normal operational limits for hours now, pulling G-forces that would have liquefied most alien species. But humans had evolved on a high-gravity world with dangerous weather patterns. Their bodies could handle stress that other beings couldn't imagine. Navigator Bin, despite the crushing acceleration, managed to plot their next course with perfect accuracy. Gunner Hein fired the ship's weapons while experiencing forces that should have made it impossible to aim. They were operating at the limits of human endurance, and they were loving every minute of it. Meanwhile, squad leader Dong Hyun was discovering something important about human psychology. His unit had been fighting continuously for 6 hours, and they were getting better at it. Sir, reported one of his Marines, I think I'm starting to understand how these things think. They always respond to threats the same way, by bringing in more units from the flanks. So if we fake a retreat, Donghyun began, they'll follow us into a kill zone. Exactly. It was a typically human insight. Other species tried to understand their enemies through logic and analysis. Humans learned by fighting them, developing an intuitive understanding of their opponent's behavior through direct combat experience. Dr. Heejin, the fleet's combat psychologist, was studying this phenomenon from the science vessels. Her job was to understand how human minds adapted to new forms of warfare, but what she was seeing exceeded her expectations. Admiral, she reported, our troops are showing remarkable adaptability to alien combat conditions. They're not just learning the enemy's tactics. They're beginning to think like predators hunting new prey. Is that good or bad? Yang asked. For us? Very good. For the enemy, they have no idea what they're dealing with. The truth was becoming clear as the battle progressed. Humans were the only known species that had evolved as both pack hunters and tool users. They could function as individuals or as a coordinated group, switching between modes as the situation required. The biomechanical entities had encountered many species that could coordinate, and many that could fight independently. But they had never faced a species that could do both simultaneously. Engineer Jinwoo was putting the finishing touches on his latest creation, a modified torpedo that carried Somin's biological weapon. Instead of a conventional warhead, it contained a virus specifically designed to disrupt organic computing systems. "Will it work?" Somin asked. "Only one way to find out," Jinwoo replied. The torpedo launched from the human fleet and arrowed toward the largest biomechanical vessel in the enemy formation. It penetrated the creature's defenses and detonated deep within its organic systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive ship began to convulse, its movements becoming erratic. The virus was spreading through its biological network, corrupting the organic computers that controlled its functions. "It's working," Nari reported excitedly. "The infection is jumping to other ships in the network. Their communication system is turning into a transmission vector for our weapon." Across the biomechanical fleet, ships began to lose coordination. Some fired on their allies, others flew in random directions. The carefully orchestrated swarm was becoming a chaotic mob, but the greatest shock was yet to come. As the biological virus spread through their network, the collective consciousness of the hive gained access to human computer systems. In its desperate attempt to understand these new enemies, it began accessing Earth's databases. What it found there changed everything. Videos of Earth's wildlife, documentation of humanity's evolutionary history, records of wars fought with stone and steel and fire, images of a world so dangerous that even the plants were predators. For the first time in its existence, the hive consciousness understood what it was facing. These humans were not just another species to be consumed. They were the apex predators of a death world, shaped by millions of years of evolution that had taught them one simple lesson: kill or be killed, and they had just brought that lesson to space. The hive's collective consciousness reeled from what it had learned about humanity. Through the corrupted data links, it had seen Earth, a planet where even the smallest creatures were deadly, where the weather could kill, where survival required constant vigilance and aggression. These humans were not just warriors. They were the product of evolution's most brutal classroom. In the depths of space, the biomechanical fleet began to retreat for the first time in its species' history. But Admiral Hyung was not about to let them escape. "All units, pursue and destroy," he ordered. "We end this here and now." The human fleet gave chase like a pack of wolves hunting wounded prey. They had fought for 12 hours straight, but instead of growing tired, they seemed to be getting more dangerous. This was what humans called battle frenzy, the state where exhaustion was replaced by pure predatory instinct. At the center of the fleeing biomechanical formation was a structure the size of a small moon. Dr. Wu Jin's analysis suggested it was the primary command nexus for the entire hive network. If they could destroy it, the remaining bioships would lose all coordination. "That's our target," Admiral Hyung announced. "General Yunbi, I want every Marine we have ready for the largest ground assault in human history." General Yunbi smiled grimly. "Yes, sir. My people have been waiting for this." The assault began with a bombardment that lit up space like a new star. Human dreadnoughts fired everything they had at the biomechanical structure, punching holes in its organic armor and creating landing zones for the Marine assault. Then came the dropships. 10,000 vessels carrying 2 million human Marines launched simultaneously. They screamed through space toward the enemy structure, taking fire from defensive batteries and losing ships with every second. But for every transport that was destroyed, 2 more made it through. Sergeant Minho led the first wave, his combat pod slamming into the biostructure's surface, with enough force to crack the organic material. Around him, thousands of other Marines were doing the same thing, turning the enemy's command center into a giant battleground. "Move! Move! Move!" he shouted to his squad as they fought their way through corridors that pulsed like living arteries. The biomechanical defenders were fierce, but they had never faced anything like human Marines in powered armor. The humans moved through the structure like antibodies attacking an infection, clearing room after room with methodical efficiency. Lieutenant Su-young and her demolition team were tasked with reaching the structure's power core. They fought their way through 10 levels of defenders using explosives and flamethrowers to clear their path. "Contact ahead," one of her Marines called out. "Multiple hostiles, heavy armor. Light them up," Su-young replied calmly. The firefight that followed would have been impossible on any other world. The human Marines fought in corridors barely wide enough for their armor, under crushing gravity that was 3 times Earth normal, while biomechanical entities attacked from every direction. They loved every minute of it. In the deepest part of the structure, Sergeant Minho's squad encountered something they had never seen before: the Hive Queens themselves. Ancient biomechanical entities the size of buildings connected to the network by thousands of organic cables. "My God," breathed one of his Marines. "They're huge." The Queens looked at the humans with compound eyes that had witnessed the consumption of countless species across the galaxy. They had expected to see fear in these new creatures' faces. Instead, they saw the cold calculation of professional predators sizing up their prey. One of the Queens spoke through a translation device, its voice echoing through the chamber like the sound of grinding metal. "You cannot defeat us," it said. "We have consumed civilizations for millions of years. We are eternal." Minho checked his weapon and looked around at his squad. They were tired, battered, and running low on ammunition. They were also completely unimpressed by the aliens' boasting. "Maybe," he replied. "But you've never fought humans before?" The final battle was brief, but decisive. The Queens were powerful, but they moved slowly and predictably. The human Marines, trained in close-quarters combat against Earth's deadliest predators, moved like ghosts through the chamber. When it was over, the ancient rulers of the biomechanical hive lay dead, their organic computers sparking and dying. Across the structure, similar scenes played out. Human Marines systematically destroyed every command node, every communication hub, every critical system that kept the hive functioning. Dr. Heejin, monitoring the assault from the fleet, watched the psychological profiles of the assault teams with fascination. After hours of continuous combat, the Marines were showing elevated aggression levels, increased coordination, and improved tactical awareness. "They're entering a pure predatory state," she reported to Admiral Hyung. "This is what humans become when they're fighting for survival. Other species have war. We have hunting." The end came suddenly. As the last command center was destroyed, the remaining biomechanical ships across the system simply stopped functioning. Without the collective consciousness to guide them, they drifted helplessly through space. But the hive had one final message to send. As its collective consciousness died, it broadcast a warning across the galaxy. The transmission reached every known species, carrying images of human warfare and a simple message: "Beware the third planet of the Sol system. The predators there have learned to travel between stars." In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Hyung stood on the bridge of his flagship and surveyed the wreckage. The biomechanical fleet was destroyed. Their threat to the galaxy ended forever. But more importantly, humanity had proven something to themselves and to every other species watching. "Sir," reported Commander Sunho, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council wants to meet with our representatives. The Elthari Republic is offering a formal alliance. Even the Meridian Empire is requesting diplomatic talks." Hyung nodded. The galaxy's perception of humanity had changed overnight. They were no longer seen as dangerous primitives, but as the species that stepped up when others stepped back. "Captain," Jiho's voice came through the communication system from the planet's surface. "Admiral, we've completed the evacuation of all remaining Villani civilians. Total saved, approximately 200,000. It wasn't many compared to the 5 million who had died, but it was 200,000 souls who would live, because humanity had answered their call for help." "What are your orders, sir?" Sunho asked. Admiral Hyung looked out at the stars, thinking about the future. Somewhere out there, other peaceful species might be facing extinction. Other predators might be prowling the galaxy, looking for easy prey. "Signal Earth Command," he said. Tell them we're establishing the first human protection fleet here in Volani space. Our mission is simple. Anyone who preys on the innocent will face the consequences." He paused, thinking about the message the dying hive had sent across the galaxy. "And Commander? Make sure our new diplomatic partners understand something. The galaxy just learned what happens when you threaten innocent people while humans are watching. Let's make sure it doesn't forget that lesson." In the weeks that followed, the story of humanity's intervention spread across known space. The species, that had once been considered dangerous barbarians, were now recognized as the galaxy's protectors, the ones who would fight when others wouldn't, who would risk everything to defend the defenseless. The Volani erected monuments to their human saviors. Other species began requesting human protection for their colonies. Pirates and raiders found their activities suddenly much more dangerous as human patrol ships appeared in system after system. But perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. They had discovered their purpose in the galaxy, not as conquerors or exploiters, but as guardians. They were the species that evolution had shaped for war, and they would use that gift to preserve peace. The Deathworld had given birth to protectors of life, and the galaxy would never be the same.